Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Emily Sue.
And I'm Raymond Yeung. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
Oil companies slammed for taking too long to cut retail prices when crude oil costs less.
Charred body found after fire in Chunwan, raising fresh concerns about subdivided flats.
And search continues in Taipei River for people still missing after yesterday's dramatic crash. The Consumer Council has taken local oil companies to task for quickly raising retail prices when crude oil costs more, but responding slowly when crude oil is cheaper.
The watchdog, however, is unable to say whether there is profiteering because it lacks information. ATV's Alison Chan reports.
Global oil prices have been plummeting, but many motorists are baffled because the drop does not appear to be reflected at the pump. In a 2-year study, the Consumer Council found that oil companies were quick to raise retail prices when the price of crude oil climbed, but acted more slowly to cut fuel prices when crude oil was cheaper. In the first half of 2013, 5 local oil companies increased retail prices on average 4 days after the price of crude oil rose. But when oil became cheaper in the second half of last year, it took them 8 days to reduce retail prices. The price of crude oil has dropped by about half, from around $107 a barrel to $56 in the past 6 months, but retail prices have been reduced by only 24%. But the watchdog could not say if there was any profiteering because it does not have information about the firm's cost structures.
There's a time lag, but the key question in actual fact is whether the time lag is reasonable for the consumers when there is a price change. The information transparency is very important. Reasons being is the public has to understand the difference and also for us to monitor whether the industry has profiteering or not.
Won said more information is needed, including expenditure on labor and transport, before the council can determine if there's any profiteering in the industry. Alison Chan, ATV News.
A mainlander has been jailed for 2 months as a judge warned that the smuggling of milk powder out of the city is getting out of control.
And with the Lunar New Year around the corner, there are fears that parallel traders will step up their activity. ATV's Arthur Erkiola reports.
27 people went to court today accused of breaking the 2-tin limit on milk powder taken across the border. In one case, Fanling Magistrates Court heard that a 47-year-old mainland tourist had tried to smuggle out more than 10 kilos of milk powder. He was jailed immediately for 2 months. The judge said the situation is now out of control, with about 20 such cases being heard each day. Usually those who exceed the legal limit by small amounts are fined or warned, while those taking out more receive suspended jail sentences. With the Lunar New Year holidays approaching, the security chief welcomed the court's tougher stance and warned people not to smuggle infant milk formula across the border to sell at a profit.
This has been a hot season, a peak period for those parallel traders who will take excessive formula powder across the boundary. We will spare no efforts and ensure that all these offenses will be detected and brought to justice.
He also warned people not to heed online calls to set fire to warehouses, storing goods for parallel trading. On Tuesday, a teenager made his first appearance in Fanling Magistracy, charged with planning to commit arson after a warehouse in Shengshui was set on fire. Arthur Erkiola, ATV News.
An infectious diseases expert has dismissed comparisons of the current flu outbreak with the SARS epidemic that killed 299 people 12 years ago.
Severe flu has already claimed 126 lives this year, but experts warn that the worst is yet to come. After severe flu claimed the lives of more than 100 people so far this year, many have started to compare the outbreak with the SARS epidemic that killed 299 people in Hong Kong 12 years ago. But an infectious diseases expert dismissed such claims.
You have very young healthcare workers dying with SARS. Many people with no underlying disease are affected, come down with illness, and some die. This is a completely different ballgame. Now, most of the cases who died are those with underlying disease or extreme of age.
Yeung, who chairs Hong Kong University's Infectious Diseases Unit, urged the government to boost local research and development and consider manufacturing vaccines in the long run.
I have to admit that there is actually not enough support at this stage in time. All right, that is the truth.
On radio this morning, microbiologist Ho Pak Leung warned that the flu outbreak may worsen towards the Lunar New Year in 2 weeks' time. He said only 10 to 15% of the population has been vaccinated, which is far from satisfactory. Lawmaker Kwok Ka-ki, who's a doctor, hopes a public subsidy scheme can be expanded to more age groups to encourage more people to be inoculated.
The safety of subdivided flats came under the spotlight again today after a man was killed in a fire in a Chunwan building.
Another person was injured and dozens more were led to safety by firefighters. Here's Arthur Urquiola.
Flames engulfed a flat on the mezzanine floor of a 6-story residential and commercial building in Chunwan early this morning. Firefighters rushed to the building in Yipei Square after the blaze was reported at around 5 a.m. They had to break into the flat where the fire broke out to douse the flames. After an hour, the fire was put out, and during an inspection of the premises, firefighters found the charred body of a man in the stairwell. There were several cubicles in the flat, and authorities suspect it was subdivided. At the height of the blaze, more than 50 people were led to safety, and at least one man was taken to hospital for smoke inhalation. According to this resident, it was completely dark when people tried to flee the building. The cause of the blaze wasn't suspicious, but investigations are still underway. There was clear damage after the blaze was put out, with the walls blackened and debris littered in front of the building. DAB lawmaker Chan Han Pan, who is also a Chunwan district councillor, said the flat was divided into 8 units, and the tenants included the man who was killed. He believes there are hundreds of other subdivided flats in the district to cater to the less well-off. Arthur Urquiola, ATV News.
Ministers in charge of Hong Kong's political reform has promised to accurately reflect local sentiments to Beijing officials.
This comes as a divide between the SCR government and Pan-Democrats over reforms continues to widen. Justice Secretary Yeung, one of the 3 ministers in charge of political reform, headed to Beijing this afternoon as the second round of public consultation reached its halfway stage. He promised to accurately reflect local sentiments to the central government. This will include the contentious blank votes proposal by legal expert Albert Chan. It would allow voters to reject all chief executive candidates selected by the nominating committee for the 2017 election. Yeung also pledged to continue canvassing for support from the 27 pan-democratic lawmakers who have said they would veto the government's final reform proposals so long as set under Beijing's restrictive framework. The government needs the backing of at least 2/3 of the 70 members in LegCo to pass its blueprint. But in a setback, medical sector legislator Leung Ka-lau, considered a moderate, raised eyebrows by declaring that he would vote no. Inside the chamber, a bid by the Pan-Democrats to demand that Beijing withdraw the strict rules for 2017 was voted down. In a related development, the Alliance for Peace and Democracy, founded by Beijing loyalist Robert Chow, has launched a 5-day campaign urging people to speak out on political reform. He warned Pan-Democratic lawmakers that they will suffer in the next elections if they ignore the public's wishes on universal suffrage.
We are not going to persuade them. Let the people persuade them. I think when the people speak up, they will know that these are the people who's going to cast their votes in 2015 and 2016. So they will face the wrath of the people, of the voters, if they choose to disregard what the people want.
The alliance will begin distributing hundreds of thousands of leaflets in different districts starting tomorrow.
The government's former chief advisor has poured cold water on a proposal by a moderate Democrat to back the city's political deadlock.
Lau Siu-kai said Beijing will not agree to abolish functional constituencies in return for LegCo's approval of the SCR government's political reform package. Former government advisor Lau Siu-kai, who's now a leading member of a Beijing think tank, today added his voice to the debate on Hong Kong's political turmoil. He was asked about the feasibility of a proposal by moderate Pan-Democrat Ronnie Tong to break the political stalemate. The Civic Party lawmaker said he's willing to champion the government's electoral blueprint for the 2017 chief executive election if it promises to abolish LegCo functional constituency seats in 2020. Lau said it would be very difficult for the administration to make a promise. and he said the furthest Beijing will go is to come up with an electoral arrangement that combines elements of universal suffrage with functional constituencies. Democratic Party chairwoman Emily Lau hit back, describing Lau Siu-kai's comments as unconstitutional. The Basic Law says Hong Kong will have universal suffrage, and universal suffrage of LegCo means abolishing indirectly elected seats, she declared. Lau Siu-kai said if all 27 Democrats stick to their vow to veto the government's reform package, it would have dire consequences.
And there will be more political confrontation between the Democrats and the government, between the Democrats and the central government. And there will be increasing polarization within Hong Kong society. And that will make further democratic development very difficult, given the increasing mutual mistrust among all parties.
Lau also pointed out that some people on the mainland feel that Beijing made the wrong decision in 2007 by promising Hong Kong universal suffrage. 12 people are still missing after yesterday's crash in Taipei as weather conditions hinder the search for them.
31 people on the Taiwanese plane are confirmed dead as officials search for answers into the crash. ATV's Raymond Yeung reports.
The grim search continued today for those still missing when a Trans-Asia plane crashed into the Keelung River in Taipei yesterday. Overnight, firefighters using cranes lifted large chunks of the plane, but parts still remain submerged. The water temperature dropped drastically, said Taipei Fire Department Deputy Chief Huang Jinwei, making it very difficult for divers. The front and tail of the plane and the two engines have been recovered, but parts of the wings have yet to be brought up. According to the head of Taiwan Civil Aeronautics Administration, Lin Qiming, the search was hampered by fast water currents. This afternoon, officials of the Taiwanese airline again bowed in apology for the fatal tragedy, the second to hit Trans-Asia in 7 months. Those confirmed dead in yesterday's disaster included the pilot Lau Qian-sung. He's been hailed as a hero for banking the aircraft into the river and narrowly averting buildings. The civil aeronautic chief denied claims that the pilot had reported problems in one engine before takeoff. The ATR-72 propeller plane carrying 58 people suddenly lost control just minutes after takeoff from a Taipei airport on a flight to the outlying island of Kinmen yesterday. It clipped a road bridge and a taxi before crashing into the river. More than half of the 53 passengers on board were mainland tourists whose grieving relatives arrived in Taipei today. Taiwan has invited mainland authorities to join in the investigation. Trans-Asia is offering compensation of around $38,000 for each fatality. Winna Wang, ATV News.
Turning to sports, Real Madrid have extended their lead in Spain, and in England, Liverpool fans endured a nerve-wracking time as the Heroes left it too late to see out Bolton in the FA Cup.